The compound was silent, except for the wind. In the center courtyard, a woman knelt with her hands bound behind her back, a black hood over her head. 3 armed men stood around her, their faces covered, their rifles slung casually across their chests. They were not nervous, they were not hurried. They had done this before. One of them pulled out a small video camera, checking the battery indicator. Another adjusted the woman's position, shoving her shoulder so she faced the lens at the correct angle. The third man, clearly the leader, pulled a long curved blade from his belt. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. He held it up to catch the harsh desert sunlight, making sure the camera would capture the gleam of steel. They were 40 minutes from uploading this video to the world. They were 40 minutes from making their statement. They were 40 minutes from ending Dr. Sarah Mitchell's life. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had assumed they were alone in this forsaken stretch of Syrian desert. They had assumed no one was watching. They had assumed wrong. 200 yards away, concealed behind a ridge of sun-bleached rock, a man and a dog lay perfectly still. The man's name was Marcus Kane, though in the teams they called him Ghost. He was 38 years old, a Navy SEAL with 14 years of operational experience etched into the hard lines of his face. His eyes, a pale gray that seemed to see through solid objects, were locked on the compound through the scope of his rifle. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story of courage moves you, please subscribe for more. Marcus had not been sent here. His mission brief had been clear. Reconnaissance only. Observe the suspected weapons cache. Report back. Do not engage. Command had been explicit. This was enemy territory. He was alone. Extraction was uncertain, but then he had seen her. Through his scope, 2 hours ago, he had watched them drag her from the back of a truck. Even with the hood, even bound and stumbling, he could see she was American, the way she held her shoulders, the defiant tilt of her head, despite her terror. She was one of his. Beside him, pressed against the warm stone, was Titan. Titan was a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, 85 pounds of lean muscle and absolute loyalty. His coat was a rich fawn color with a black mask that made his amber eyes seem to glow. Those eyes were fixed on the same compound, watching the same men. His ears were forward, radar dishes tracking every sound. He knew, the way he always knew, that his handler was preparing for violence. Marcus keyed his throat mic, his voice barely a whisper. "Command, this is Ghost. I have eyes on 3 hostile combatants and 1 American civilian hostage. Female, approximately 30 to 35 years old. They are preparing for execution. I am requesting immediate air support and extraction authorization." The response crackled in his earpiece after a long, agonizing pause. "Negative, Ghost. You are 40 clicks outside the NOR. Authorized operational zone. No air assets available. Your orders stand. Observe and report only. Do not engage. Acknowledge." Marcus closed his eyes. He saw his wife Emma, the way she had looked the morning he left. He had promised her he would come home. He had promised he would not take unnecessary risks. He had promised he would follow orders. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman kneeling in the dirt. She had just shifted slightly, and the hood had slipped. He could see a sliver of her face now. She had dark hair, matted with sweat and dust. Her jaw was set. She was not crying. She was facing death with dignity. Marcus reached down and placed his hand on Titan's powerful shoulder. The dog looked at him, his intelligent eyes questioning. Marcus had trained Titan from a pup. They had deployed together to 5 different combat zones. They had survived ambushes, IEDs, and firefights that had killed better men. Titan had saved his life twice. Once in Kandahar, alerting to an IED that would have vaporized their convoy. Once in Yemen, taking down an insurgent who had Marcus in his sights. "I know, boy," Marcus whispered, his voice so low only the dog could hear. "I know we're not supposed to." He looked back through his scope. The cameraman was giving a thumbs up. The leader was stepping forward, raising his knife, testing its edge with his thumb. Marcus thought of Emma. He thought of his promise. He thought of coming home. Then he thought of this woman's family, her mother, her father, perhaps her husband, perhaps her children, watching a video of her execution. He thought of her final moments, alone and terrified, dying without hope. His hand moved to his radio. Command, solid copy. Maintaining observation, ghost out. He switched the radio off. He shifted his position, his movements economical and practiced. He checked his rifle, a suppressed Mk-18, 11 rounds in the magazine, 3 targets. He pulled his sidearm, a Glock 19, and placed it within easy reach. He pulled a smoke grenade from his vest. He looked at Titan. The dog's entire body was quivering with controlled energy. He could sense the change in his handler, the shift from observer to hunter. Marcus gave a series of hand signals, a pointed finger at his own eyes, watch. A flat palm moving low, stay low. A clenched fist, wait for my command. Titan's ears flicked in acknowledgement. He understood. Marcus took a breath. He thought one more time of Emma. I'm sorry. Then he pushed the thought away. There was only the mission now. Only the 3 men, only the woman who had perhaps 5 minutes left to live. The leader was speaking now, his voice carrying across the empty desert. He was reciting something in Arabic, a pronouncement, a condemnation. The woman's shoulders were shaking, not from sobs, Marcus realized, from cold rage. She was not broken. She was furious. Marcus adjusted his breathing. In through the nose, slow and controlled, out through the mouth. His heart rate dropped. His vision sharpened. The world narrowed to the reticle of his scope. The leader finished his speech. He raised the blade high, theatrical, for the camera. He took 1 step forward, positioning himself behind the kneeling woman. Marcus squeezed the trigger. The suppressed rifle made a soft, flat crack, a sound that was swallowed instantly by the vast emptiness of the desert. The leader's head snapped back. The knife fell from his hand, clattering onto the stone. He collapsed. For a single frozen second, the other 2 men just stared, their brains unable to process what had happened. Their leader had been standing. Now he was not. There had been no sound of a shot, no muzzle flash. It was as if God himself had struck him down. The cameraman was the first to react. He dove for his rifle, leaning against the courtyard wall. Marcus's second shot took him in the chest before his hand touched the weapon. He sprawled backward, the camera toppling from the tripod, its lens cracking, on impact. The third man, younger, panicked. He spun in a wild circle, his rifle coming up, spraying bullets blindly toward the ridge. The rounds impacted the rocks 20 yards to Marcus's left, nowhere close. Marcus didn't fire. Not yet. "Titan," he said, a single quiet word. "Release." The dog exploded. He had been a coiled spring, and Marcus had just released the latch. Titan launched himself over the ridge and down the rocky slope, his powerful legs eating the distance. He was silent, no bark, no growl. He was a predator, and he was in his element. The third terrorist finally saw him. His eyes went wide. He tried to swing his rifle around, but Titan was already airborne. 95 pounds of muscle and fury slammed into the man's chest, driving him backward into the dirt. Titan's jaws locked onto the man's weapon arm, shaking his head violently. The rifle fired once, the shot going skyward, then fell from the man's nerveless fingers. Marcus was already moving. He slung his rifle and sprinted down the slope, his boots finding purchase on the loose scree. He covered the 200 yards in less than a minute, his breath controlled, his focus absolute. He reached the compound. Titan had the third man pinned, growling low, his teeth still locked on the man's arm. The man was screaming, trying to push the dog away with his free hand. "Titan, hold," Marcus commanded. The dog obeyed, maintaining his grip but ceasing the shaking. The man beneath him went still, panting, his eyes wide with terror and pain. Marcus moved to the kneeling woman. She had heard the gunfire, the screams, the sudden chaos. Her body was rigid, braced for the blade that had never come. She had no idea what was happening. Marcus knelt beside her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and calm. "I'm United States Navy. You're safe. I'm going to remove your hood." He reached out slowly, giving her time to process his words. He pulled the black cloth away. She blinked against the sudden harsh sunlight, her eyes adjusting. They were deep brown, filled with shock, confusion, and the first fragile flicker of hope. She stared at him, at his dusty uniform, at the American flag patch on his shoulder, at Titan, still holding the terrorist immobilized 10 feet away, at the bodies of her captors. Her voice was a cracked whisper. You're American? Yes, ma'am. My name is Marcus. I'm getting you out of here. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Her entire body began to shake, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. They were going to kill me. They were going to— I know, Marcus said. He pulled his knife and cut the zip ties binding her wrists. The plastic fell away, and she brought her hands forward, wincing as circulation returned. He could see the raw, bloody marks where the ties had cut into her skin. Can you stand? He asked. She nodded, but when she tried, her legs buckled. Marcus caught her, his arm steady under her shoulders. Easy. You've been kneeling for a while. Your legs need a minute. She looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. She saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the dust and sweat caking his face, the professional calm that barely concealed the readiness for more violence. Who are you? She whispered. Someone who was in the right place, Marcus said simply. She started to cry then, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of being alive when she had been certain she would die. Marcus led her, his hand a steady presence on her back, giving her the dignity of not being watched. After a moment, she wiped her face with her sleeve and straightened. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a humanitarian aid worker with Doctors Without Borders. They took me 3 days ago. From the clinic. Marcus nodded. He had suspected as much. How many others were with you? Her face fell. 2. My colleagues. They separated us. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're— One thing at a time, Marcus said. Right now we need to move. This place won't stay quiet for long. He turned to Titan. Release. The dog let go immediately, backing away but keeping his eyes locked on the terrorist. The man clutched his bleeding arm, whimpering. Marcus pulled a zip tie from his vest and secured the man's hands behind his back. Where are the other hostages? He asked in Arabic, his accent flawless. The man spat at him. You will die here, American. This desert will be your grave. Marcus's expression didn't change. He simply stood, pulled his sidearm, and aimed it at the man's knee. Last chance. Where are the other 2 Americans? The terrorist's bravado crumbled. North Compound, 5 kilometers, with Abu Rashid. But you are too late. They are dead already. He's lying, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. They kept saying they would execute us one at a time, make 3 videos. I was first. Marcus looked at her. She had regained her composure with remarkable speed. She was not hysterical. She was thinking tactically. He revised his assessment of her. She was tougher than he had initially thought. Can you walk now? He asked. She tested her legs. They held. Yes. Good. We're leaving. He pulled a portable radio from the terrorist's belt and tossed it into the sand. He crushed it under his boot. He did not take their weapons. They were Russian AKs, loud and unreliable. His suppressed rifle was worth 10 of them. He handed Sarah a canteen from his pack. Drink, small sips. We have a long walk. She drank, the water cutting through the dust in her throat. What about him? She nodded at the bound terrorist. Someone will find him, Marcus said. He keyed his radio. Command, this is Ghost. I have secured 1 American hostage, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, female, mid-30 seconds, good condition. 2 additional hostages reported at a secondary compound, 5 clicks north of my position. I am moving to intercept. The voice that came back was sharp, angry. Ghost, you were ordered not to engage. You have violated a direct command. Abort mission and move to extraction point Zulu. Marcus looked at Sarah. She was watching him, her brown eyes steady. She had heard the order. She knew what it meant. Extraction point Zulu was south. The north compound, where her colleagues were, was the opposite direction. Command, Marcus said, his voice flat. I have 2 American civilians in imminent danger. I am moving to effect rescue. If extraction is available when I'm done, I will take it. If not, I will walk out. Ghost out." He switched the radio off before they could respond. He turned to Sarah. "Can you run?" She looked at him for a long moment. She understood what he had just done. He had disobeyed a direct order. He had thrown away his career, possibly his freedom, to save 2 people he had never met. "Yes," she said simply. "I can run." "Good," he nodded to Titan. "Stay close to him. He'll keep you safe." They moved out. Marcus took point, his rifle up, scanning the horizon. Titan ranged ahead, his nose working the air, his body low. Sarah followed, her legs finding strength as the adrenaline gave her a second wind. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast canvas of rock and sand painted in shades of gold and rust. The sun was merciless, a hammer striking down from a cloudless sky. But they moved with purpose, 3 figures crossing the wasteland, driven by a singular mission. Behind them, the compound fell away. The bound terrorist shouted after them, his voice full of impotent rage. The sound faded, swallowed by the wind. Ahead, somewhere in the shimmering heat distortion of the horizon, 2 more lives hung in the balance. And Marcus Kane, the man called Ghost, was coming for them. The 5 kilometers felt like 50. The terrain was brutal, a maze of sharp volcanic rock and soft sand that shifted treacherously underfoot. The heat was a physical entity, pressing down on them like a weight. Marcus moved at a punishing pace, his eyes constantly scanning, his rifle sweeping left and right in smooth, practiced arcs. Sarah kept up. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she did not slow. She had spent 2 years in conflict zones, in refugee camps where medical supplies were scarce and danger was constant. She was no stranger to hardship, and more than that, she was fueled by something Marcus recognized: the need to save her people. Titan ranged ahead, a scout moving in zigzag patterns, his nose sampling the wind. Twice he stopped, his head snapping toward potential threats. Both times it was nothing, just the desert playing tricks. But his vigilance was absolute. After 40 minutes of brutal movement, Marcus raised his fist. "Stop!" Sarah froze, dropping to a crouch beside a boulder. Marcus pulled out a small pair of binoculars, scanning the ridge ahead. "There," he whispered, pointing. In a shallow depression on the far side of the ridge, partially hidden by camouflage netting, was another compound. This one was larger, more permanent. Concrete walls, guard towers, a rusted metal gate, and vehicles, 2 technical trucks with mounted heavy machine guns. "That's more than I expected," Marcus muttered. "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice low. "I count 6 outside. No telling how many inside." He lowered the binoculars. "This is not a rescue operation anymore. This is an assault." "Then we need help," Sarah said. "Call your people. Call for air support." Marcus looked at her, his expression grim. "I did call. They said no. I'm off the grid, Dr. Mitchell. I'm not supposed to be here. As far as my command is concerned, I'm a rogue asset. No one is coming." Sarah's face went pale. "Then we can't do this. 6 armed men? You'll be killed. I'll be killed. And my colleagues will still die." "You're right," Marcus said. He pulled his pack off, rummaging through it. "Which is why you're not coming with me." "What?" He handed her his spare canteen, a protein bar, and a small GPS unit. "You're going to take this GPS. It's programmed with the coordinates for extraction point Zulu. It's 12 kilometers south-southwest. If you walk steadily, you'll be there by nightfall. Command might be angry at me, but they won't leave you stranded. They'll send someone. You're insane," Sarah said. "You can't assault that compound alone." Marcus checked his magazine. 11 rounds. He pulled 2 spare magazines from his vest. "I'm not alone. I have Titan." The dog, hearing his name, looked up, his tail giving a single wag. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. "Listen to me. I know you think you have to do this. I know you're trying to be a hero. But this is suicide. If you die, they die anyway. Walk away. Save yourself." Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "Dr. Mitchell, what do you do? What's your specialty?" She blinked, confused by the question. I'm a trauma surgeon." "Why?" "So when someone comes into your field hospital, bleeding out, and you know the odds are against them, do you walk away? Do you let them die because it's risky to try?" She stared at him. "That's different." "Is it?" Marcus said quietly. "I'm a SEAL, Dr. Mitchell. My job is to go where others can't, to do what others won't. Those two people in that compound? They're my patients. And I don't leave patients behind." He gently removed her hand from his arm. "Now go. Titan will escort you to a safe distance, then he'll come back to me." "No," Sarah said, her voice firm. She stood up, her jaw set in a line that brooked no argument. "I'm a doctor. If you're going in there, you're going to need medical support. People will be hurt. Maybe you. Maybe the hostages. I'm coming with you." Marcus studied her face. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the resolve. She was terrified, but she was not backing down. He recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror before every mission. "You'll do exactly what I say," he said. "When I say run, you run. When I say hide, you hide. No arguments." "Agreed." He handed her a small tactical knife. "Do you know how to use this?" She took it, testing the weight. "I've used scalpels on living tissue in war zones. I think I can manage." Despite everything, Marcus felt a flicker of respect. "All right, doctor. Let's go save your friends." They moved up the ridge, staying low, using every scrap of cover. When they reached the top, Marcus pulled out his binoculars again, studying the compound in detail. "See that building on the east side?" he pointed. "Concrete, small windows, reinforced door. That's where they'll be holding them. The trucks are on the west side. If I can reach them, I can disable them, cut off their escape. And the guards? I take them quietly, one by one. Titan will help. And if you can't do it quietly?" Marcus pulled a smoke grenade from his vest. "Then it gets loud." He looked at Titan. The dog was watching him, every muscle coiled, waiting for the command. Marcus gave a complex series of hand signals. Circle left. Watch for sentries. Alert but do not engage. Titan moved, a shadow detaching from the rocks, flowing down the slope like liquid. He was a ghost, utterly silent. Marcus turned to Sarah. "When the shooting starts, and it will, you drop flat and you stay flat. Understood?" "Understood." They waited. Marcus counted seconds in his head, giving Titan time to get into position. His breathing was slow, controlled, his heart rate was steady. This was the moment before the breach, the calm before the storm. He had been here 100 times before. A soft sound came through his earpiece. Titan's alert. One bark, low and controlled. He had found something. Marcus moved. He came down the slope fast, his rifle up, using the afternoon shadows for cover. He reached the perimeter wall, pressing his back against the warm concrete. He could hear voices on the other side, men talking, laughing, the sound of a radio, staticky and distorted. He peered around the corner. 2 guards stood by the gate, smoking, their rifles slung. They were relaxed, bored. They did not expect trouble. Marcus pulled his suppressed sidearm. 2 shots, both headshots. The guards dropped without a sound. He was on them in seconds, dragging their bodies behind a stack of crates. He took one of their radios, clipping it to his vest. Titan appeared beside him, his muzzle clean, his eyes bright. He had found no other external sentries. "Good," Marcus signaled to Sarah. She ran across the open ground, her footsteps light, and pressed herself against the wall beside him. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady. "4 inside," Marcus whispered. "Maybe more. I'm going through the front. You wait here. When it's clear, I'll call for you." He didn't wait for her response. He moved to the main door, testing the handle. Locked. He pulled a small breaching charge from his vest, a strip of explosive designed to blow hinges. He set it, armed it, and stepped back. "Titan, rear guard," he commanded. The dog positioned himself between Marcus and the perimeter, watching for threats. Marcus triggered the charge. The explosion was sharp, loud, and final. The door blew inward, smoke billowing. Marcus went through the breach before the sound had even faded, his rifle up, his training taking over. The interior was chaos. A large open room, concrete floor, a few pieces of furniture. 4 men, all armed, all turning toward the sudden intrusion. Marcus fired. 1 shot, center mass. The first man dropped. He pivoted, fired again. The second man fell. The third man got his rifle halfway up before Marcus put 2 rounds in his chest. The fourth man dove behind a table, flipping it for cover. He returned fire, the deafening crack of an AK-47 echoing in the confined space. Rounds stitched across the wall beside Marcus's head. He dropped flat, his mind calculating angles. "Titan, engage!" he shouted. The dog was through the door in a flash. He didn't go for the shooter. He went for the flanking threat Marcus hadn't seen, a 5th man emerging from a side room, pistol raised. Titan hit him low, jaws locking on his weapon arm. The man screamed, the pistol firing once into the ceiling before clattering away. Marcus used the distraction. He rolled, came up beside the overturned table, and fired twice under the gap. The 4th man grunted, slumping forward. Silence. Marcus swept the room, his rifle moving in sharp arcs. No more threats. He checked each body, professional and thorough. All down. He moved to the man Titan had taken down. The dog had released on command and was standing guard. The man was bleeding, disarmed, no longer a threat. "Where are the Americans?" Marcus asked in Arabic, his voice cold. The man spat blood. "You are too late." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "What did you do?" "Abu Rashid took them. 1 hour ago. To the border. You will never find them." Marcus grabbed the man's radio from his belt. He keyed it. Static. Then a voice, speaking Arabic. "Report. What is happening there? I heard an explosion." Marcus thought fast. He responded in Arabic, his accent flawless. "Accident. Cooking fire. Contained." A pause. Then, "Idiot. Abu Rashid wants silence. The transfer is tonight." "Understood. Where is the transfer?" "At the airstrip, you fool. Where else?" The voice was impatient. "Make sure the vehicles are ready." The radio went dead. Marcus stood, his mind racing. Airstrip. That was new intelligence. He moved to the side room where the 5th man had emerged. It was a holding cell, concrete, a single barred window. It was empty, but there were signs of recent occupation. A torn piece of fabric, American-made. A medical wristband with a name, Dr. James Park. Sarah was suddenly beside him. She had ignored his order to wait. She was staring at the wristband, her face stricken. "That's James. Oh God, they really were here." "And now they're not," Marcus said. "They've been moved. To an airstrip." "Where?" Marcus pulled out a base, tactical map, unfolding it on the floor. He studied the terrain, the roads, the sparse markings. "Here," he pointed to a small notation, "abandoned Syrian military airstrip, 20 kilometers northwest." Sarah looked at the map, then at Marcus. "Can we get there in time?" Marcus checked his watch. The sun was dropping toward the horizon. "If the transfer is tonight, we have maybe 3 hours, maybe less." "Then let's go." Marcus looked at her. She was exhausted, filthy, and terrified. But she was not giving up. He made a decision. "We're taking one of their trucks." They moved outside. The 2 technical trucks sat in the courtyard, dusty but operational. Marcus checked the first one. Keys in the ignition. Fuel tank half full. The mounted machine gun was a Soviet-era DShK, heavy and brutal. "Get in," he said. Sarah climbed into the passenger seat. Titan leaped into the back, positioning himself near the machine gun mount. Marcus started the engine. It coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. They drove out of the compound, the metal gate hanging open from their entrance. The desert opened before them, vast and indifferent. Marcus pushed the accelerator down, the truck bouncing over the rough terrain. The sun was a blood-red disk on the horizon, staining the sky crimson and gold. Sarah held onto the door handle, her knuckles white. "What's the plan when we get there?" "I don't have one yet," Marcus admitted. I'm making this up as I go. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. It was a short, slightly hysterical sound. You're insane, you know that? Yeah, Marcus said. I've been told. They drove in silence for a while. The desert scrolled past, empty and endless. Then Sarah spoke, her voice quiet. Why are you doing this? Really? You don't know me. You don't know James or Rachel. You're risking everything. Your career, your life. Why? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the rough track ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. 5 years ago, I was on a mission in Yemen. Bad intel, compromised position. We got ambushed. 3 of my teammates were captured. I was ordered to pull back, to leave them. Command said they were already dead. I obeyed. I followed my orders. He paused, his hands tightening on the wheel. 2 weeks later, their execution video was posted online. I watched it. I watched them die, and I knew I could have saved them if I had just... He trailed off. Sarah reached over, placing her hand on his arm. It wasn't your fault. Maybe not, Marcus said, but I swore I would never follow that order again. I would never leave someone behind because it was too risky or because someone in an air-conditioned room told me to. So that's why, Dr. Mitchell, I'm doing this because I can, and because no one else will. Sarah squeezed his arm once, then let go. They didn't speak again. There was nothing left to say. The airstrip appeared as the last light faded from the sky. It was exactly as Marcus had pictured. It, a crumbling relic of a forgotten war. A single pockmarked runway, maybe 1,000 meters long, 2 collapsed hangars, 1 intact building, low and long, probably the old operations center, and lights, electric lights powered by a generator, illuminating the intact hangar. Vehicles parked outside, men moving, and on the runway, its engines already whining in pre-flight warm-up, a small cargo plane. Marcus killed the truck's engine, coasting to a stop behind a rise of sand a half-kilometer out. He pulled out his binoculars, glassing the scene. 8 men? He said quietly. No, 9. Armed. The plane is almost ready. They're loading it now. Do you see them? Sarah asked urgently. Do you see James and Rachel? Marcus adjusted the focus. Near the plane, 2 figures were being led out of the operations building. Their hands were bound. Even from this distance, even in the failing light, he could see they were Westerners, a man and a woman. I see them, he confirmed. They're alive. Sarah let out a shuddering breath of relief. Then, immediately, the fear returned. What do we do? Marcus lowered the binoculars. His mind was working, calculating odds, angles, timing. 9 armed men, a plane preparing for takeoff. 2 hostages about to be loaded onto that plane. Once they were airborne, they were gone forever. He looked at Titan. The dog was alert, watching him, waiting. He looked at Sarah. She was terrified but determined. He looked at his rifle. 11 rounds left, 2 spare magazines. Impossible odds. But he had faced impossible odds before. We're going to stop that plane, Marcus said. He pointed to the mounted machine gun on the truck. Can you fire that? Sarah stared at him. What? No. I'm a doctor, not a soldier. It's simple. Point it where I tell you. Pull the trigger. The recoil is heavy, but the mount will absorb most of it. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can, he said, his voice firm. Because if you don't, your friends die. It's that. Simple. Sarah looked at the machine gun, then at the airstrip, then back at Marcus. She swallowed hard. Tell me what to do. Marcus gave her a crash course. How to charge the weapon, how to aim, how to fire in controlled bursts. She was a fast learner, her surgeon's hands adapting quickly to the unfamiliar mechanics. I'm going to drive straight at them, Marcus said. When I tell you, you open fire on the vehicles. Not the plane, not the men. The vehicles. You make them scatter. You make them panic. That gives me the opening I need. And then what? Then I get your friends. He started the engine. Titan positioned himself beside Sarah, bracing against the truck bed. Marcus looked at the airstrip one more time. The plane's engines were louder now. Men were shouting. The hostages were being walked toward the ramp. It was now or never. Marcus slammed the accelerator down. The truck lurched forward, engine roaring, tires spinning in the sand before finding traction. They burst over. The rise, headlights blazing, engines screaming. The men at the airstrip looked up, confused. A truck was racing toward them. One of their trucks. What was happening? Now, Marcus shouted. Sarah pulled the trigger. The DHK roared to life, a deafening hammering sound that shook the entire truck. Tracer rounds cut through the darkening sky, bright orange lines of death. Her aim was wild, erratic, but it didn't matter. The heavy rounds tore into the parked vehicles, punching through metal, shattering glass. The men at the airstrip dove for cover, shouting, trying to bring their weapons to bear. But they were confused, disoriented. The attack was coming from one of their own trucks. Was it an accident? A betrayal? Marcus drove straight into the chaos. He swerved at the last moment, the truck skidding sideways. He was out of the cab before it had fully stopped, his rifle up, moving with lethal purpose. "Titan, protect," he commanded, pointing at Sarah. The dog leaped from the truck bed, positioning himself between Sarah and the threat, his teeth bared, his growl a rolling thunder. Marcus advanced. He fired, controlled precise shots. One man down. 2, 3. The terrorists were trying to regroup, but Marcus was a whirlwind of violence. He moved between the vehicles, using their cover, his rifle barking death. But there were too many. Return fire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the dark. Rounds cracked past Marcus's head. One caught his vest, the impact like a sledgehammer, driving the air from his lungs. He grunted, stumbled, but did not fall. At the plane, Abu Rashid, the leader, made his decision. He screamed at his men, "Forget the truck, forget the attacker. Get the hostages on the plane." They were leaving. Now. James and Rachel were dragged up the ramp. They were fighting, struggling, but they were weak and bound. The ramp began to lift. No. Marcus saw it happening. He couldn't reach them. He was pinned down, surrounded. The plane was taxiing, turning onto the runway. Its engines roared, building power. He looked at Titan. The dog was still guarding Sarah, faithful to the last command. Marcus made a choice. "Titan," he roared over the gunfire. "Attack the plane! Stop the plane!" Titan's head snapped toward the aircraft. He understood. He left Sarah's side and ran, a black and gold blur racing across the tarmac. He was fast, incredibly fast, but the plane was accelerating. Titan reached the landing gear just as the plane began its takeoff roll. With a powerful leap, he sank his teeth into the rubber tire, his jaws locking with crushing force. His weight, his momentum, his absolute refusal to let go created drag. The plane shuddered. Inside the cockpit, the pilot felt the resistance. He increased power. The plane strained. And then, with a sickening lurch, the tire Titan was holding blew out, shredded by the dog's powerful bite and the stress of takeoff. The plane veered wildly, skidding off the runway. One landing gear collapsed. It slewed. Sideways, engines screaming, and came to a grinding halt in the sand, its nose tilted at a drunken angle. Titan released, rolling clear, shaking his head. He was up in seconds, circling the disabled aircraft, barking furiously. Marcus didn't waste the moment. He ran toward the plane, firing as he moved, suppressing the remaining terrorists. Sarah, seeing Marcus exposed, did the only thing she could think of. She fired the machine gun again, wild covering fire, forcing the enemy to keep their heads down. Marcus reached the plane. The ramp was jammed, partially open. He could see inside. James and Rachel were on the floor, terrified. Abu Rashid was shouting, trying to kick the ramp free. Marcus climbed up, pulling himself into the cargo bay. Abu Rashid turned, his pistol coming up. Marcus shot him. Center mass. The terrorist collapsed. U.S. Navy. Marcus shouted, "Stay down." He cut their bonds with his knife. "Can you walk?" James nodded, his face pale. "Yes. God, yes." Then move. Go! Marcus pushed them toward the ramp. They stumbled down, their legs weak but functional. Titan was there, herding them away from the plane toward Sarah and the truck. A final burst of gunfire erupted. The last two terrorists made a desperate attempt to stop them. Marcus turned, his rifle empty. He dropped it, pulling his sidearm in one smooth motion. He fired twice. Both men fell. Then, silence. The only sound was the wind, the dying whine of the plane's engines, and the ragged breathing of 5 survivors. Marcus looked around. The airstrip was a battlefield, vehicles burning, bodies scattered, the plane tilted and broken. He had done it. Against impossible odds, against orders, against all logic, he had done it. He walked to the truck. Sarah was climbing down from the gun mount, her face streaked with tears and dust. James and Rachel were leaning against the vehicle, holding each other, sobbing with relief. Titan limped up to Marcus, his paws bleeding from the sharp runway. Debris, his muzzle cut from the tire rubber. But his tail was wagging. He looked up at his handler, his amber eyes bright. Marcus knelt, wrapping his arms around the dog, burying his face in the thick fur. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You incredible, perfect, good boy." Sarah knelt beside them, her hand on Titan's head. "He saved us, all of us." Marcus looked up at her, at James and Rachel, at the 3 people who were alive because one man and his dog had refused to accept the word impossible. He pulled out his radio, switching it back on. "Command, this is Ghost. I have 3 American hostages, secured and safe. I am requesting immediate extraction for all 4 of us. Coordinates to follow." The response was immediate, the voice of his commanding officer, and it was not angry. It was awed. "Ghost, this is Command. We have your position. Extraction inbound. ETA 20 minutes. And Ghost." "Good work. Damn good work." Marcus switched off the radio. He looked at the horizon where the stars were beginning to appear, bright and cold and beautiful. He had broken every rule. He had disobeyed direct orders. He had risked everything. But 3 people were going home tonight. And that was the only thing that mattered. Sarah came and sat beside him, her shoulder touching his. They didn't speak. They just sat, in the quiet after the storm, and waited for the sound of the helicopter that would carry them home. Titan lay between them, his head on Marcus's knee, his breathing deep and steady. He was tired. He was hurt. But he was content. They had done their job. They had saved lives, and in the end, that was the only mission that ever truly mattered. Epilogue. HEA. 3 weeks later. The military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, was clean, quiet, and smelled of antiseptic. Marcus Kane stood in the hallway, wearing his dress uniform, his hands clasped behind his back. Through the window of the recovery room, he could see Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Dr. James Park, and Dr. Rachel Torres. They were being debriefed by State Department officials, giving their statements, their testimonies. They were alive. They were safe. They would go home to their families. Marcus had spent the last 3 weeks in meetings, debriefings, and disciplinary hearings. He had expected to be court-martialed. He had violated direct orders, endangered his own life, and stolen military assets. But something strange had happened. The story had leaked, not through him, but through Sarah. She had spoken to the press, to her organization, to anyone who would listen. She had told them about the Navy SEAL who had disobeyed orders to save 3 civilians, about the dog who had stopped a plane. The story had exploded. Public pressure had mounted. Senators had called for medals, not courts-martial. The Secretary of Defense had personally intervened. In the end, Marcus had been given an official reprimand for his file and an unofficial handshake from his commanding officer who said, "Don't ever do that again. But I'm proud you did." The door to the recovery room opened. Sarah emerged, and her face lit up when she saw him. She walked over, and without hesitation, she hugged him. "They're sending me home tomorrow," she said, stepping back. "James and Rachel, too. Real doctors finally cleared us." "That's good," Marcus said. "You saved our lives, Marcus. All 3 of us. We can never repay that." "You don't need to repay anything," Sarah smiled. "I'm going back. To the field. To Doctors Without Borders. I know it's dangerous. I know it could happen again. But it's my calling, the same way this is yours." Marcus nodded. He understood. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object. It was a medical pendant, the symbol of her organization. She pressed it into his hand. "This was my grandfather's. He was a field medic in World War II. I want you to have it. For luck. For protection." Marcus looked at the worn silver pendant, then at her. "Thank you." Sarah stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Ghost, for reminding me that heroes still exist." She walked away, back to her colleagues, back to her life. Marcus stood alone in the hallway. He looked down at the pendant, turning it over in his scarred fingers. A soft sound made him turn. Titan was walking toward him, a veterinary technician trailing behind with a leash. The dog's shoulder was bandaged, his paws wrapped, but his gait was strong. He had recovered. He was ready. The tech handed Marcus the leash. "He's all yours. Cleared for duty." Marcus knelt, and Titan came to him, pressing his broad head against Marcus's chest. Marcus wrapped his arms around the dog, holding him close. "You and me, boy," he whispered. "Always you and me." Titan's tail wagged once, a solid, sure movement. They walked out of the hospital together, into the German afternoon. A transport was waiting to take them back to their unit, back to their team, back to the work that would never end. Marcus looked up at the sky, clear and blue and infinite. Somewhere out there, someone else was in danger. Someone else needed help. Someone else was waiting for a hero. And when that call came, Marcus Kane and his loyal partner would answer. Because some men don't follow orders. Some men follow their conscience. And those men, against all odds, changed the world. The flight back to the United States was a study in contrasts. Marcus sat in the cargo hold of a C-17, the massive aircraft humming with the steady drone of its engines. Around him, pallets of equipment were strapped down with military precision. But in the small passenger compartment, something extraordinary was happening. Dr. Sarah Mitchell sat across from him, wrapped in a military-issue blanket, her hands curved around a cup of terrible military coffee. Beside her, James Park and Rachel Torres were asleep, their bodies finally surrendering to the exhaustion that adrenaline had held at bay for so long. Between Marcus's boots, Titan lay stretched out, his bandaged shoulder rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. The dog was dreaming, his paws twitching occasionally, chasing some phantom threat or perhaps reliving the moment he had brought down a plane. Sarah watched the dog for a long moment before speaking. "Does he know?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Does he understand what he did? That he saved 3 lives?" Marcus looked down at his partner, his expression softening in a way few people ever witnessed. "He knows he did his job. That's all that matters to him. I gave him a command, and he executed it perfectly." "It was more than that," Sarah insisted. "When he ran toward that plane, when he refused to let go even as it tried to take off, that wasn't just training. That was courage. That was sacrifice." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand moving to rest on Titan's uninjured side. "Military working dogs are different from pets. They're warriors. They understand duty in a way that's hard to explain. Titan knew that plane had to be stopped. He knew I was counting on him. And he knew that failure meant you and your colleagues would disappear forever." He paused, his jaw tightening. He would have held on until his teeth shattered or that tire tore his jaw off. That's the kind of loyalty they have. Sarah shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening. "I've worked in war zones for 6 years. I've seen soldiers, rebels, mercenaries. I've seen bravery and I've seen cowardice. But what I saw back there—" She gestured vaguely toward the rear of the aircraft, toward Syria, toward the battlefield they'd left behind. "That was something else entirely. You ran toward certain death to save strangers. You disobeyed orders that could have destroyed your career. Why?" "I told you why," Marcus said simply. "No, you told me about Yemen, about the teammates you couldn't save. But there's more to it than that, isn't there?" Marcus looked at her. This woman he'd met kneeling in the dirt with a hood over her head, hours away from execution. She had steady brown eyes that saw too much, the eyes of someone who had witnessed humanity at its worst and still chose to believe in its best. "My wife?" he said finally, the words coming slowly, as if each one cost him something. "Emma. She died 4 years ago. Cancer." Sarah's expression shifted, sympathy flooding her features. "Marcus, I'm so sorry." "She was a nurse," he continued, as if Sarah hadn't spoken. "Worked at a free clinic in San Diego, helping people who couldn't afford health care. No insurance, no money, no hope. She helped them anyway. She used to tell me that every life mattered, that it didn't matter if you were saving a senator or a homeless veteran. A life was a life." He looked down at Titan again. "When she got sick, I took emergency leave. I was home for 8 months, watching her fade. She knew what I did for a living. She knew I went into dangerous places. And one night, maybe a week before she died, she made me promise something." Sarah waited, not pressing, giving him the space to continue. She said, "Marcus, when I'm gone, you're going to want to be reckless. You're going to stop valuing your own life because I'm not here to come home to. But I need you to promise me that you'll find something worth living for. Find something that makes your life matter, not something that ends it." His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. "I promised her I would. But for 3 years after she died, I couldn't figure out what that was. I volunteered for every dangerous solo mission. I took risks that made my commanders nervous. I was trying to honor her by staying alive, but I was also courting death because I didn't know how to exist without her." "And then?" Sarah prompted gently. "And then I was lying on a ridge in Syria, watching a woman about to be executed, and I heard Emma's voice in my head. Not my conscience, her actual voice, clear as day," she said. "That's it. That's what matters. Her life. Their lives. That's your purpose." He met Sarah's eyes. "So, I broke protocol. I violated orders. I risked everything. Because Emma was right. Saving lives. That's what makes my life matter." Sarah reached across the narrow space between them and took his hand. Her grip was firm, a doctor's strong hands that had sutured wounds and held the dying and brought comfort in the darkest moments. "She would be proud of you." "I hope so," Marcus said quietly. They sat in silence for a while, the aircraft carrying them over the Atlantic, over an ocean that separated the war-torn places from the places of peace. But Marcus knew the truth that Sarah knew. There was no true separation. The world was connected by invisible threads of violence and hope, of cruelty and compassion. "What happens now?" Sarah asked eventually. "To you, I mean. You said there was a disciplinary hearing." "Official reprimand," Marcus said. "It goes in my permanent file. Means I'll never make command, never get promoted beyond my current rank. I'm effectively capped." "That's not fair," Sarah said, her voice heating with indignation. "You saved 3 American lives. You captured intelligence about a terrorist weapons network. You disobeyed a direct order from a superior officer during active combat operations." Marcus finished for her. "In the military, that's one of the worst things you can do. Doesn't matter if it worked out. The precedent is dangerous. If every operator made their own calls about which orders to follow, the chain of command falls apart. So they punish you for being a hero." "They punish me for being insubordinate," Marcus corrected gently. "There's a difference. I knew what I was doing when I turned off that radio. I knew the consequences. I accepted them." Sarah studied his face, seeing the weathered lines, the scars, the premature gray at his temples. He was only 38, but he looked older, carrying the weight of 100 impossible decisions. "Do you regret it?" Marcus looked at James and Rachel, still sleeping, still alive. He looked at Sarah, whose hands would return to healing, whose skills would save countless more lives in the years ahead. He looked at Titan, his partner, his brother in arms, who had given everything when it mattered most. "No," he said simply. "I don't regret it at all." The aircraft banked slightly, beginning its long descent toward Dover Air Force Base. Below them, the American coastline was coming into view, a thin line of land separating the ocean from the sky. "I want to stay in touch," Sarah said suddenly. I know that's probably against protocol or weird or whatever, but I need you to know that you didn't just save my life. You changed it. You reminded me why I do this work, why it matters." Marcus nodded. "I'd like that." "And Titan," Sarah added, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. Titan's eyes opened, his tail giving a sleepy wag. "I want updates on this magnificent creature. I want to know he's okay." "He'll be okay," Marcus assured her. "These dogs are tough, tougher than most humans I know. He'll heal, and he'll be ready for the next mission." "Do you ever think about what happens to them after?" Sarah asked. "After they retire, I mean. When they're too old or too injured to work anymore?" Marcus's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Some handlers adopt their dogs when they retire. Some dogs go to other handlers or to civilian families. It depends. What about Titan? When his time comes, what happens to him?" Marcus looked down at the dog, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. "He's mine, has been since he was 8 weeks old. I trained him, deployed with him, bled with him. When he can't serve anymore, he retires with me. We're partners for life, not just for missions." Sarah smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed her exhausted face. "Good. That's how it should be." The aircraft touched, down with barely a tremor, the pilots executing a perfect landing. As the cargo ramp lowered and the bright American sunlight flooded in, Marcus saw what he'd expected, a welcoming committee. But it wasn't brass and metals. It was medical personnel, State Department officials, and unexpectedly, media. "Looks like your story got bigger than you thought," Marcus observed dryly. Sarah stood, gathering her blanket around her like armor. "Good. People need to hear it. They need to know what you did." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus watched as Sarah, James, and Rachel were swept into a controlled chaos of medical evaluations, debriefings, and eventually, carefully managed media appearances. He stayed in the background, deflecting attention, redirecting questions. This wasn't his story to tell. He had done his job. The spotlight belonged to the survivors. But Sarah wouldn't let him hide entirely. During her brief press conference, when asked how they had escaped, she said simply, "A Navy. SEAL and his military working dog risked everything to save us. They violated orders, faced impossible odds, and refused to leave us behind. I'm here because of their courage. We all are." The reporters, sensing a bigger story, pressed for details, names, units, specifics. But Sarah, showing the same steel that had kept her alive in captivity, gave them nothing. "He doesn't want recognition. He just wants to get back to work. And I'm going to honor that." Later, after the media had dispersed and the officials had collected their statements, Marcus found himself in a quiet hangar bay. Titan was being examined by a military veterinarian, getting his bandages changed and his wounds checked. Marcus watched through the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "She's something, isn't she?" a voice said behind him. Marcus turned. It was his commanding officer, Captain Richard Torres, no relation to Rachel. The coincidence of the name was just that. Torres was a hard man, a former SEAL himself, with a face like weathered granite and eyes that missed nothing. "Sir," Marcus said, straightening. "At ease, Kane. This isn't official." Torres stepped up beside him, also watching the vet work on Titan. "Hell of a thing you did out there." "I did what needed to be done, sir." "You disobeyed a direct order. You stole enemy equipment. You engaged hostile forces without authorization. You operated outside your mission parameters. And you brought home 3 American civilians who would otherwise be on an execution video right now." Torres looked at him. "I don't know whether to court-martial you or put you in for a silver star. The reprimand is sufficient, sir." "Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't." Torres was quiet for a moment. "You know what the brass is really afraid of, Kane? They're afraid that if we reward what you did, every operator out there will think they can make their own calls, that they can override command because they have a gut feeling. That leads to chaos." "I understand, sir. But here's the thing they don't want to admit," Torres continued. "Sometimes the man on the ground sees things that the man behind the desk can't. Sometimes the right call is the one that breaks the rules. You made a judgment call. It could have gotten you killed. It could have sparked an international incident. But instead, it saved 3 lives and yielded intelligence that's already leading to the dismantling of a major weapons trafficking network. Marcus said nothing, waiting. So here's what's going to happen, Torres said. Officially, you have a reprimand in your file. Officially, you were reckless and insubordinate. But unofficially, every operator in the teams knows what you did. You're a legend now, Kane. Ghost, the SEAL who disobeyed orders and pulled off a miracle. I don't want to be a legend, sir. I just want to do my job. Torres smiled, a rare expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Too late. You're both now. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Sir, Command has made a decision. They're assigning you to a new unit. Direct Action Group, Special Projects Division. Small team, high-risk missions, minimal oversight. You'll have more autonomy than you've ever had. You'll be able to make calls in the field without waiting for clearance. But the flip side is, when things go wrong, it's on you. No backup, no excuses. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a promotion. This was the military's way of handling a problem asset. Give him enough rope to either justify himself or hang himself. And if I refuse, sir? Torres's expression hardened. Then you take a medical retirement, and you spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have made a difference. But we both know you won't refuse, Kane. This is who you are. This is what Emma wanted for you, a purpose. Well, here it is. The mention of his wife's name, which Torres shouldn't have known, hit Marcus like a physical blow. How? Did you? I read your psych evals. All of them, including the one from after she died. Torres's voice softened fractionally. You're not the only one who's lost someone, Kane. You're not the only one who's had to find a reason to keep fighting. The difference is, you actually found it. Don't waste it. Torres turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. That dog of yours? The vet says he's healing ahead of schedule. Cleared for light duty in 2 weeks, full duty in 6. Seems like he's as stubborn as his handler. Yes, sir, he is. Good. You're going to need him. Torres walked away, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. Marcus stood alone, processing what had just happened. A new assignment, a new team, a new level of responsibility and risk. It was everything he had trained for and everything he had feared. The door to the veterinary office opened, and Titan emerged, his gait slightly stiff but his head high. The vet gave Marcus a thumbs up. He's good to go. Keep the bandages clean, limit strenuous activity for another week, and he'll be back to full strength in no time. Marcus knelt, and Titan came to him immediately, pressing his head against Marcus's chest. Marcus wrapped his arms around the dog, feeling the solid warmth, the steady heartbeat, the unshakable presence that had become his anchor. We got a new assignment, boy, Marcus murmured into the soft fur. Sounds like it's going to be dangerous. Sounds like it's going to be exactly what we're made for. Titan's tail wagged once, a solid affirmative. They walked out of the hangar together into the bright afternoon sun. In the distance, Marcus could see the American flag snapping in the wind, its colors vivid against the blue sky. It was a symbol he had fought for, bled for, and nearly died for more times than he could count. But it wasn't the flag that kept him going. It wasn't duty or honor or glory. It was the faces. Sarah's face, when the hood came off, and she realized she wasn't going to die. James and Rachel's faces when they were pulled from that plane, trembling and weeping with relief. The faces of everyone he'd saved, everyone he'd protected, everyone who had gotten to go home because he had been there. That was his purpose. That was Emma's gift to him. Not just survival, but meaning. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, seeing a text from an unknown number. It was Sarah. Made it through medical. They're sending us home tomorrow. I wanted to say thank you one more time, and to tell you that what you said about Emma, about finding purpose, it helped me too. I'm going back to the field. I'm going to keep saving lives. Because you showed me that's what matters. Stay safe, Ghost. The world needs more people like you. Marcus typed a brief response. "The world needs more people like you too, Doc. Stay safe out there." He pocketed the phone and looked down at Titan. "What do you say, boy? Ready to get back to work?" Titan barked once, sharp and clear, the sound of a warrior ready for the next battle. They walked toward the operations building, where their new assignment awaited. Behind them, the sun cast long shadows across the tarmac. Ahead, the future was uncertain, dangerous, and full of impossible missions. But Marcus Kane had never backed down from impossible, and with Titan at his side, he never would. Because some men were born to follow orders, some men were born to give them, but Marcus Kane was born to do something else entirely. He was born to stand between the innocent and the darkness, to be the last line of defense when everyone else had given up, to be the ghost who appeared when hope was lost. And as long as there were people in danger, as long as there were lives that needed saving, he would answer the call, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter the orders, because that was his promise. To Emma, to himself, to every person who needed a hero. The door to operations opened, and Marcus and Titan stepped through, disappearing into the shadows where they belonged. The mission was never over. The work was never done. But for men like Marcus Kane and dogs like Titan, that was exactly how they wanted it. Final reflections. Age. 1 year later. The classroom at the Naval Special Warfare Center was packed with fresh-faced candidates, all of them in the final phase of their training. They had survived Hell Week, mastered the technical skills, and proven themselves physically and mentally capable. But today's lesson wasn't about tactics or weapons. It was about something more fundamental. Marcus Kane stood at the front of the room, Titan sitting at attention beside him. On the screen behind them was a simple title, "The Moral Responsibility of the Warrior." All right. You've all been trained to follow orders. Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. From day one, you've been taught that the chain of command is absolute, that your job is to execute the mission as briefed, no deviations, no questions. He paused, letting that sink in. And 99% of the time, that's exactly right. The chain of command exists for a reason. It prevents chaos. It ensures coordination. It keeps teams alive. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a satellite image of a compound in the Syrian desert. But there's that 1%. That moment when the orders don't match the reality on the ground. When following protocol means someone dies who doesn't have to. What do you do then? A hand went up. A young operator, maybe 24, with the cocky confidence of youth. "Sir, you follow orders. You trust that command has information you don't." "Good answer," Marcus acknowledged, usually correct. But here's the thing about that 1%. It's the moment that defines who you are as a warrior. Not your shooting scores, not your swimming times. The moment when you have to choose between your career and your conscience. He clicked. Again. Now the screen showed a photo of Sarah, James, and Rachel standing together outside their clinic, alive and smiling. "A year ago, I was given a direct order not to engage in a hostage rescue. Command said it was too risky, said the odds were impossible, said I should observe and report only." The room was absolutely silent. They all knew this story. It had become legend in the teams. "I disobeyed that order. I engaged anyway. And because of that decision, 3 American civilians came home alive. I also got an official reprimand that will follow me for the rest of my career." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the young warriors who would soon be facing their own impossible moments. "So here's my question for you. Was I right or wrong?" Another hand. "Sir, you were right. You saved lives. But I also violated the chain of command," Marcus countered. "I set a precedent that orders are optional. What if the next guy who disobeys orders gets his whole team killed? What if his judgment isn't as good as mine? What if he's motivated by ego instead of mission?" The room was wrestling with it now. He could see it on their faces. "There's no easy answer," Marcus said quietly. "That's the burden of leadership. That's what they don't teach you in training. Sometimes you'll face a choice where every option is wrong, where following orders leads to tragedy, but disobeying them leads to chaos. And you'll have to make that call in real time, with incomplete information, knowing that people will live or die based on your decision. He knelt beside Titan, his hand resting on the dog's head. This dog taught me something about that choice. When I gave Titan the command to stop that plane, he didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate the odds. He didn't worry about the consequences. He just acted with absolute commitment because that was his purpose. Marcus stood again. But here's the key difference between Titan and us. He's incapable of questioning. He trusts me completely, and that trust allows him to do extraordinary things. We, on the other hand, have to carry the weight of our choices. We have to live with the consequences. He clicked to the final slide. It was Emma's photo. Before you deploy, before you face your first real impossible situation, I want you to ask yourself one question. What are you willing to sacrifice for? What matters enough that you would risk everything, your career, your freedom, your life, to protect it? He looked at Emma's image, her warm smile, her intelligent eyes. For me, it's the belief that every innocent life has value, that when I have the power to save someone, I have the responsibility to try. Your answer might be different, but you need to know what it is before the moment comes, because in that moment, you won't have time to figure it out. The instructor called the room to attention, and Marcus was dismissed. As he walked toward the exit, several of the candidates approached him, wanting to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him he'd inspired them. He accepted their gratitude with quiet humility, but inside he wondered if he'd done the right thing. Had he just created a room full of future insubordinate operators who would think they knew better than their commanders? Or had he given them permission to be fully human, to trust their moral compass when the rules failed? Outside, the sun was setting over Coronado, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Marcus found a quiet bench overlooking the ocean, and Titan settled beside him, the dog's warmth a familiar comfort. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. She sent them occasionally, updates on her work, photos of the people she was helping, reminders that the mission continued in 1,000 different forms. Just finished a 12-hour surgery on a child who stepped on a landmine. She's going to make it. She's going to walk again. Thought you'd want to know that the ripples of what you did a year ago are still spreading. Thank you, Ghost. Always. Marcus smiled, typing back. That's your victory, Doc. You did the work. I just gave you the chance. Her response came immediately. That's what heroes do. They give people chances. He pocketed the phone and sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the waves, feeling Titan's steady presence beside him. Tomorrow he would deploy again. Another mission, another impossible situation, another chance to stand between innocence and darkness. But tonight, just for this moment, he allowed himself to feel what Emma had wanted for him. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the deep soul-level peace that came from knowing your life had meaning. From knowing that your choices, as costly as they were, had made the world marginally better. We did good, boy, he said quietly to Titan. Emma would be proud. Titan's tail thumped once against the bench, a solid affirmation. And as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, Marcus Kane sat with his partner and his memories, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Because that was his promise, his purpose, his mission, to be the ghost in the darkness, the last hope when all others had failed, the warrior who would make the impossible choice when no one else could. And as long as he had breath in his body and Titan at his side, he would keep that promise, no matter what. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments what was your favorite moment. Was it the K9's loyalty, the SEAL's protection, or the moment justice was served? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.